Hello and welcome to 100% Real with Ruby. Today I have Dal on. Again, we talk a lot about the things that actually are holding us back, that keep us in the same sabotaging cycle. This time we will kind of touch on the fact that she tried to do a diet again because she wanted to go back into one. But because she's already been through all the paces before, she realized that the sacrifices she was starting to make, how hard it was starting to feel, the friction, it wasn't actually something she was willing to go through. And you don't learn this unless you go through it. The only way out is through. The only way out is through learning. There's no failures. There's no any of that stuff. There's only learnings. And this is something that you heard on the last podcast with Amy. It was the thing that stood out to her, where there is no such thing as failing. There's no such thing as starting over. It's all about revolving, but you're revolving higher. And as you revolve at this higher level, it's kind of like a spiral, but on the way upwards, versus if you continue to self-shame, like we spoke about on the last podcast, and you don't slow down to process your emotions, that spiral, you're ending up on a continual downward trajectory. But this is how I also relate to dieting. If you keep going to summer shreds, this is like my forte. So I really wanted to bring in something that relates to what I'm most passionate about, and that's people that diet and go to diets and reactive dieting, kind of like emotional regulation. I actually want to say, if you can't emotionally regulate, you'll feel something uncomfortable, and your immediate response is, let's go into a diet. Your immediate response is, there's something wrong. The only thing I can control is my food. If you haven't listened to my podcast with Leanne, that's something that held her back a lot, in that her food was her control. As soon as work got really crazy, she's like, no, I want to diet. She came to me saying, I want to dial in. I want to get stricter on my diet. I want to this, that, and the other, because it's something we can control. Anything we can't control makes us feel uncomfortable, and it's kind of our human nature to try to cling to something. Or I don't really understand why our bodies actually feel so much fatter when we feel so uncomfortable with our situation. Like, how do they go from feeling okay to just feeling fat all of a sudden, or fluffy, or our belly is suddenly a problem? It's crazy. But you will also feel fatter and heavier by natural sense of holding more water, holding more inflammation from stress. So that's also a thing. But I wanted to say this because the more that you keep pushing this cycle of thinking that another diet's going to solve your struggles, or another macro calculation or tweak, or changing your brown rice to whole grain rice when changing it from white rice to brown rice isn't enough, like whatever it is, it's not in the food, it's in the training. There is nothing that stops you from changing your body outside of the training, because if you aren't seeing the results you want, food doesn't build muscle. It facilitates it. And something that this is kind of what I'm going to be throwing at Dal. She can probably throw it back to me in the way that it relates to me, which is what I just said. But Dal obviously has lost a lot of weight, and then she went into maintenance, which is the scariest thing ever, to be told that you have to eat more food when you still feel like you have so far to go. And she has been going through a lot of her own life stuff. And her own life stuff is the very thing that could cause her to spiral. I want you to talk about how in the past it usually caused you to spiral, and what's different now, but more so, added to that, what made you stop doing the diet before? What changed for you? And how do you see this now, as you don't know what you don't know until you're in it, but at the same time, if you don't slow it down enough to realize what's important to you, you're going to keep thinking that this dangling carrot is the answer. Little do you know that you're allergic to carrots, and it's been freaking eggplant or aubergine. Wait, no, that just makes it a dick. It's been pineapple the whole time. Wait, no, pineapple still feels sexual. Pineapple feels sexual. It's been a freaking apple you wanted your whole life. There we go. There's some sweetness to it now.
Oh, wow. There's a lot to unpack. It's funny. I actually just posted something today. Can I just read it quickly? Quick fixes can change your body, but healing the inside is what changes your life. When you start working through the emotions, the triggers, the beliefs that have kept you stuck, the physical results don't just show up, they stay. Because lasting transformation is never just about the body. It's about the heart, the mind, and the healing that ties it all together. So that kind of touches on basically what I was talking about, is like, quick fixes or weight loss medications, or even, surgeries, tummy tucks, whatever you want to call it. All of that is to really mask the symptoms, right? It doesn't actually solve anything if, one, you haven't dealt with your emotions or the root causes, why you may turn to food to cope. And then two, if you're not doing the work and going through the process, like you mentioned, to learn, unlearn, figure things out, really fuck around and, like, what works for you. And, I can come up with systems and I can say, hey, do this, do that, whatever, but that's not necessarily going to work for your life. Yes, the fundamental principles, they are the same. But circling back to what you said about maintenance, like I hadn't lived in maintenance for like a dedicated maintenance phase ever, really. I was always just kind of off going from one extreme to the other, losing the weight and then gaining it all back. And then when I did get into my journey and I did do dedicated fat loss phases and dedicated maintenance phases, I realized, shit, this is where I want to live. Like maintenance is freedom from everything, really. And so when I decided a little while back, I had already been in maintenance over a year, that, I might go into fat loss phase. I tried for the first 2 weeks, but I wasn't in it. I didn't want to do it. I was just like, I want to eat. I want to live at maintenance. I'm content where I'm at. Do I want to lose more body fat? Yes. But does it need to happen right now? No. And the difference is that I could choose that. For myself.
I would choose. You could
choose exactly. Whereas before, it was always for something, an event, a wedding, a birthday, a vacation, something that was coming up in life that I had to do it for, right?
Sorry, I want you to say, because I don't know how this relates to a lot of people in the same way, and I think you can give a better view on this. A lot of people don't feel like they can actually choose this for the simple fact that every single time they dieted before, they gained it all the way back. So they feel like there's no other alternative. There's no self-belief. There's no, well, I've struggled with this my whole life. I can't have they don't see that they can have what they want and live the life that they want at the same time. It's almost like, well, I can't enjoy these things with sacrificing my whole life, but I want to have my goals at the same time. So I'm not going to actually get clear on the vision that I want to have for the future. And something my clients struggle with a lot is they don't actually know what they want. They don't feel like they have clear goals, even though they know what they want. They viscerally know what they want, like not viscerally. On the surface level, they know what they want, but they don't actually know what they want. So they don't commit themselves to it. Or it feels like, well, it just doesn't feel like there's a clear direction because they've never actually entertained the idea deep enough. And there's this mental model that I like to use that no one uses. And I'm still trying to get people to use this model where sometimes we have this fear that this is going to happen. And then it's in our head that, okay, well, if I do this, this is going to happen. But we never actually trace that fear to the end of the story. And if you actually trace that fear to the story, you realize that it doesn't actually end the way that it does in your head. It's just that you've never actually passed that gate. Standing at the gate, it feels like, holy fuck, I can never go in there because this whole thing is just going to explode in my face. Whereas no, if you actually go into the gate, you'll realize there's this, I used to read books all the time. Oh my goodness, there was this amazing book where there was just, they couldn't get through to the other side, but little did they know that there was a secret garden on the other side that was gorgeous. It was called The Secret Garden, I think.
Right.
If you go onto the other side, it could be the best thing ever. Or it could be exactly how you think it's going to be, bland, deserted, whatever. However, there are not the demon characters that you think you're going to be there. You aren't handcuffed walking into the situation. You're able to actually now use the lessons you've learned in the past to approach it differently. However, we don't pause enough, which is what I started this conversation with for, because you have the tools now. But unless you slow down enough to realize, like I said, what's important to you, but also what you've learned in the process, the tools you've gained in the process, you're never going to trust yourself to move forward. What's different about the situation now, because it's not the same way that it was before. I was having a conversation with Dal before this about my relationship now, like family things now, bringing up a family, etc. And I was like, well, there were all these struggles before because there was the divorce, there was all of this other stuff. And it's like, well, he's already been through hell and back. What's there to say that he's going to want to ever go through that again? But she said to me, well, this is a completely different thing. And the difference is you. And he's done the work. That was something he said. He's actually done the work and he's processed it. And if I think about it as well, he never had the ability to communicate before. He used to work his ass off before, whereas now he's on the other side where he doesn't have to work his ass off as hard anymore. He gave up the things that used to take up 24/7 of his time. He has mental space, but also I'm not the same person that his ex was, and it's going to be a completely different thing because he's learned his lesson through that as well. And it's not up to me to see it that way. It's up to him to see it that way, but he's done the work to do that. If we have the communication needed to move forward. And the reason I brought this up is because you need to have that come to Jesus talk with yourself. It is relationships with others are a reflection of the same way that you need to do with yourself. And you said it's never about the body, it's about the heart, the mind, and the healing. The thing that came up for me when you read that is who gives a shit? Like, no one's going to give a shit until they've already been through the cycles so much that they're sick of the cycles. You're in a place where you're willing to do things differently, because you can be sick of the cycles but still never trust yourself to lean in.
Well, where you're going with this, and we've talked about this before, one of the key things here is letting go of the timeline. You have to let go of the timeline to be able to go through that process. You know, it's all about practice and reps, right? Like putting it, it's just practicing every day, putting in the repetitions, learning. Like you said, you're continuously learning. And when you let go of that timeline, you give yourself that space mentally, physically as well, to allow yourself to be able to fall, get back up, keep moving forward, to learn, to unlearn, to challenge the beliefs that you have about yourself, or the things that, you know, are ingrained or what you were taught, to say, okay, how do we build that self-trust, self-belief? Because that is key. You've already mentioned that. That is key to all of this. But how do we do that? We go through the process, right? It's not just about dieting, because if it was just about dieting, just about the numbers, we know, I'm sure your audience, Gen Pop in general, they've done it all. It's not like they haven't lost weight and haven't been successful doing some type of program, whether extreme, probably extreme. So it's not like, you know, your audience members and people that we work with haven't ever seen those results physically, but what's a missing link? What are we going to tie all of this to?
I mean, you're doing it temporarily, but do you actually for results or real results?
How are you going to get the results that last, right? And that missing piece of it is your emotions. It's emotional regulation. It's a disconnection from yourself. And how do we come back to that where you can reconnect with yourself? And that starts with compassion and kindness for oneself.
Two things. The first one is, this is meant to be the post I was meant to put up before, but I'll put it up after. You know, the unfortunately I do love.
Oh yeah, that's
right. That I have a post on that coming up, but in the caption I say, because how I actually coach, asking for training videos and logbooks before I care about your progress photos and scales. It's the training that changes your body and gives you all you thought dieting and the typical check-ins did. So the reason I love this is because you come at it from the emotional sense. I come at it from the training sense because it's more tangible.
Yeah.
But the reason that I come at it from you need to focus on training is because you're not going to get a double body weight deadlift in the matter of a couple of months. You're not going to overhaul your life in a couple of months. We can't do the emotional work if you don't have something tangible to go towards, something that's rewarding. And I feel like once you learn this, it's everything. And then I wrote, I'm ignoring the in-body results you send me because they're inaccurate, useless, and defeating. I'm making your date nights non-negotiable because it's more about showing the last 3 reps, not what's your weight. Because if the weight in the gym isn't challenging you, if your program isn't specific, this is how it's tailored to what you said, specific and structured for the long-term physique change, it's not changing you because you change in the process. We're not going to be dealing with whatever triggers here and now. The same time next year, if you actually did the work, it'll be different triggers that come up. But the reason I brought this up is because all of the other things, they're band-aids. They're short-term validation things. This is the stuff that makes things stick. But what I wanted to say is, once I go back to what you said, yeah, you have to allow yourself to fall and to come back up. Relating this to relationships, unless you know who you are, what you want, who is X, who is that.
Yeah, who is Ruby? Yeah, for sure. Yeah, you need to know yourself.
Going to work because you're always going to have to keep a mask on. You're going to have to keep putting up this persona that you've created in your head. And the only thing is, in your mind, it's going to be, I can't let go of this because otherwise I'm going to lose him because he now knows only this version of me. I can't be my real self, blah, blah, blah. This relates to diets. If you do a 12-week or a 30-day turn in 30 days, your whole life is going to come together, whatever else. If you only go through diets that way, you're going to be clinging on for dear life, scared to ever gain fat, scared to ever gain weight. Next minute, menopause comes. Next minute, you don't have time to do all the things you need to do. Next minute, your body's breaking down because you never built the strength that you need to build to actually get you through life. You never built the metabolism. You've run yourself down. Now you're going to lose it all, just the same way that you're going to lose your relationships once the rabbit or cat or mouse, once the eggplant comes out of the bag.
Yeah, no, totally. Yeah, you have to, you got to do the work for sure. And that might look different. Like I know, for you, like it is very much, like the strength training, gaining that muscle, and really like, and for me too, it is. However, if you're just starting out or you do have a lot of weight to lose or whatever, that can look different for you. Do we want to incorporate strength training in your life at some point? Yes, for sure. But that may not be right in the beginning, right? Like, and it might look different as you move through the process and figure things out and figure out what you like. And I don't know, I'm of the mindset that like, okay, let's have a minimum, do 2 days a week and then go find something else you enjoy. Because at the end of the day, you're only going to stick to something that there is some inherent joy in, right? Like if you are miserable doing certain things, that's not to say don't do it, but forcing yourself to do something all of the time, that's just a recipe for also not following through and kind of like giving up on that as well. So what's a minimum dose, right? What's that?
What happened if you kept forcing that diet? What do you think would have happened? Talk to me about that. Trying to force that diet to work because you went into a second diet.
Yeah, it's the same thing with diets. Like my mentality and like views on that is also the diet has to work for you, right? Like the diet, as far as the food is concerned, of course, it has to fall within, the macros that we talk about, protein, carbs, fats, all of that. But what does that look like for you? Because if you're trying to do something that's completely unsustainable, then that's just not something that you're going to be able to stick with. All of this, though, comes back to like we get into the nitty gritty of this stuff when you choose to do this differently. And I know with me and you, we are so much about dropping that timeline and just like, let's just focus on where you're at and start there, right? Let go of that timeline so that you can move through this process and figure out what works for you and learn these things and come up with the systems and learn how to read nutrition labels, whatever that might look like. But I think for a lot of, I'm just going to say women, that's who, I work with a lot, and I'm sure you do too. There's just so much unlearning, like so much, Ruby, so many myths, so many things that we hang on to. And it's not necessarily a lack of, I would say, what am I trying to say? So like, it's not that they don't know. They do know. I think, that argument where, everyone knows what they need to do. Well, that's not necessarily always true. I don't think they do. I didn't. But when I started, I was still doing Weight Watchers and I was scared to not. And so I was cross-referencing for the longest time with MyFitnessPal because I didn't know. But as I got more immersed into nutrition, I was able to let go of that, realize, no, that's not doing anything good for me. I'm not learning from that. This is what I'm actually learning from. Again, that took time to get to that point. And the same thing with maintenance. I was also afraid of going into maintenance. I would have rather just stayed in a slight deficit just so I wouldn't gain weight because I was scared. And it wasn't until, like you said, I acquired those tools and developed those skills and I have that skill set and the systems in place where I was like, no shit, maintenance can work. No, maintenance is where I want to be. But I had to move through that process and get to that point where I was like, yeah, okay, I get this now. I understand. And again, choosing.
What actually changed? What actually changed, and what do you think people are missing? Because people are still struggling with this and they still keep flashing to diets. Going back to the reactive dieting.
Yeah, what changed was, there's just a ton of different variables. I can't pinpoint, this was the exact thing, but it was, one of it was letting go of the timeline. Two was, learning more about nutrition and learning to let go of some of these beliefs that I held on to by doing it, by doing the work, like being afraid of carbs, being afraid of sugar, being afraid of, eating too much, not understanding scale fluctuations, for example.
Do you have any questions that people can reflect on for that though? Not the actual timeline and the carbs, because people are still so afraid. Well, what if this happens? What if that happens? And the only reason I wanted to interject is because you said you choose. You said the word choice before, but people still don't feel like, because they've struggled so much already, the fear is if you let go a little bit, you're just going to turn lazy, or you're not going to want to diet again. You're not going to want to diet again. And the fear that you're not going to want to diet makes you even more scared, because it's like, well, I'm going to let my body go and then I'm not going to be happy in it, because people don't realize that you change the process. Like your mindset will shift in the process too. You just don't let yourself because of what you are holding fundamentally. Can't see if your hands are always in front of your face. You need to like space your hands away and then eventually let the hands go so you can experience living. What's important to you? And then you can tie this into like the business negotiating where
right.
I think this ties in there, and you can throw it back at me if you want, because I mentioned that too.
Yeah, I think it's the whole landscape is just of fitness, nutrition. I think for just someone coming from the outside in, it's very confusing. It's very complex. It's also very nuanced. And I think at the end of the day, working with a coach, you want to know that key thing. It was probably working with a coach for me because that's what opened the doors for everything. It's having that guidance, the assurance, especially when you're just starting, and that will help you, to move through that process in the way that you and I always talk about it. Does that make sense? Or does that, like, how do you,
No, it
yeah,
does.
that's how I see it. I would say that's probably the key difference. And of course,
The
then
reason it makes sense, no, because you asked if it makes sense, and if to
yeah,
anyone that it doesn't make sense to you, think about this. You cannot, like, how the insert French word, how the eggplant, do you think that you are going to see a different perspective when you are not a different person? Like, you cannot see it from a different lens when you only know your lenses. And it's kind of ridiculous that we think that we can see it any other way. Like, there's this concept in psychology of the rose tinted glasses. You put on like rose glasses and you're going to see things with a rose shade. Put on blue glasses, you're going to see things through a blue shade. And I know that there was like when I used to work with the therapist on my team with clients, something that he always used to say to them is, I want you to give different emotions to different glasses. I want you to view this as this emotion. It brings up completely different feelings in your body. And if you follow each of those thoughts through, it has a different story to it. And you are the protagonist in your own story. But you are also the script writer of your own story. And that's one thing that I only just now thought about with the never ending story. If you think about the never ending story, yeah, the story's already written for the most part. But then as soon as he gets into the story and realizes that the book is writing itself as he is living it on the other side, that's you. Every single action is going to change the trajectory. You choose. It's not written there for you, so you can choose how it ends. But so many people are in denial. And I think that's a hard thing too.
Yeah, and that's not to say that, like, it is to question the narratives, because a lot of the stories that you tell yourself, they stem from somewhere, and they're also distorted, right, through time. And so it's really important to challenge yourself as well when it comes to those narratives. And also, like you were saying, tying it back to what we were talking about actually before we hit record, was this is my view. And so, like, I have kids. I've been having a rough day with mine today. And I was just telling Ruby, and this relates back to dieting, we'll tell you how, but really it's like, if you don't have kids, I don't think that you could really ever realize and fully conceptualize what it's like to have kids and then to follow certain goals, or like if it's fitness, nutrition, whatever it is, life is completely different. And so I was just telling Ruby that it's hard. Like, it is hard. And dieting is the same thing. Like, dieting is not easy. It is also very difficult. And again, your life is going to look completely different than mine, with or without kids, or even someone who has kids. Their life is going to look completely different because I parent differently. They parent differently. For me today, my kids were having like total emotional dysregulation. So I had to spend a lot of time sitting with them and co-regulating, right? And so again, now relating that back to dieting, what does that mean? Well, it means that you can't sit there and compare yourself to this person, that person, or whatever is going on, or what you should be doing. And instead put yourself, make that decision, take that step, and go through the process so you can understand what it feels like for you. And with the guidance of a coach, like, I'm just saying, like, this is not you can work with whoever you want. This is not us, it's just, it helps to have that different perspective to help just basically hold your hand and guide you through the process one step at a time, until eventually you start seeing that, wow, like, I can do this. I'm capable. I got my shit together. I know I can do this.
I have a different way of viewing it now.
Okay.
So with kids, you don't realize, it's almost like, well, actually, you have an idea that your life is going to change fundamentally because now you have to look after this little thing. It's really different once you become the mom, once the baby's in your hands, once the baby's crying, once all of a sudden you have all these maternal instincts. And every single person's experience with newborns is going to be different. Some have really shitty sleep. Some will be crying more than others. Some will demand your boob more than others. Like, every single newborn's experience is going to be different. Same with dieting. But the thing is, your life isn't really yours at all for the first 6 weeks, especially. Your sleep is going to be shit, and that's going to have downstream effects.
Girl, I'd say first like 4 years.
This is very related. I'm going to explain to you how this is very tied to dieting and actually how you maintain results, how your beliefs are completely flipped upside down and how we can change them, because you're going to relate this to your kids. The sacrifices that you need to make and all that kind of stuff is completely different in the first 6 weeks compared to the first year, compared to the first 3 years, compared to the rest of the life. Because as they grow up, they're going to need less and less of you. As they grow up, you're going to shove them into school and you get most of the day back. As they grow up after that, then you're an empty nester and you get to live your life freely and party and chuck your foot up in the air. Like, I'm exaggerating, but the thing is, this is exactly what your goal body is going to be like. At first, you're going to need to make sacrifices, but it's not forever. At first, you're going to need to say no to things that you typically say yes to. You're going to have to put restrictions on things, but that is not forever. You do go through the process, you learn. But the thing is, so many people want what's on the other side, the balance, the this, that, the other. They want to be able to eat the burgers all the time, to be able to enjoy the whatever the friggin' hell it is all of the time. And I'm going to have this conversation with Adam on our podcast. Because when you're in a dieting phase, you need to say no. You probably need to take your own food to places, because you not doing that is going to lead to you spiraling. I would rather you be more on the diet culture end of the spectrum than the anti-diet end of the spectrum when you're in a diet. But that's the thing. Diet culture has you dieting 24/7, 365, but you're not going to be in there forever. You need to be okay with like pushing towards the quote unquote diet culture side of things to then pull away from it when you're not in the diet anymore. But the thing is, people are so far in the, I can't lose weight, I'm scared to this, that, and the other, that they don't actually realize that life is so much brighter on the other side. It's just that if you have a lot of excess fat to lose, you're going to have to go through the shit longer than a typical person. And that's okay. Your baby is just one that always seems to have sleep regression. But very soon the sleep regression is going to be over. And then you're going to have to deal with the teething. And very soon the teething is going to be over. And then you actually get a toddler that sleeps through the night, and then you can actually have your friggin' energy back. And that's the same as diet. You can't just stay in newborn phase forever.
Yeah, and seasons of life, right? That's exactly what you're describing, is different seasons of life. And I know for me and a lot of my clients, it's like they spent a lot of months moving in and out of different periods of their life, whether it was vacation, dedicated maintenance, life events, whatever the case was. And they kind of spent, say, 8, 9, 10 months learning, unlearning, doing all this. Then they got to a point where what you're describing is getting in, getting out. Right. And that's not always possible to do right off the bat, is what I think both of us essentially are saying.
And well, actually, there is such thing as get out, but this is exactly what is different within people. For example, I have a client that has a lot of fat to lose. She is in the get out phase right now, but we're not get out. Let's build for another year. She's get out. Let's have a diet break for as long as we need to have a diet break for, and then get back into the diet. Right. Because you always need to diet in blocks. Dieting is block-ic. I don't want to say phasic. It's block-ic. That's rublish, according to Adam. I come up with my own dictionary of words. It's block-ic. It depends on what then happens after each block. Is it we still have fat to lose? Let's keep blocking it off. But the thing is, you can't start in a block. You need to start with, let's get the tools. Let's get the work. Let's get all of this stuff first. So then we can actually build the friggin' house. And
so that you can transition in and out and do all that. And exactly. And it takes time, right?
You might realize that all you have a friggin', all you have is a particular sort of drill, but all of a sudden this problem came up, but you don't have any of those tools in your vicinity. So now we need to actually put the bricking, I'm just going to use that as a word. We're going to need to put the blocking on hold, go and get this other tool, and then come back to building the house. And the house, like there are fatless bricks, and then there are the building bricks, but then there's also, we need to do the work outside of that to be able to do any of that kind of stuff before. And I don't think people actually realize that your body changes regardless if you are doing the training, because training is the only thing that changes your body and it makes you stronger, blah, 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 blah. But without doing the work, the training is changing your body in a way, like I say changing your body, because if you're not trying to change your body, you're losing it, because you lose muscle, you lose everything once you hit 30. But is it actually building anything? That's a different story. And that's why you need to do the work, because if you're going to keep putting yourself into deficits and you have no consistency in your food because you haven't done the work, good luck getting anything that's going to stick. We have 10 minutes, I think. So
yeah, you got to do the work. That's it. You got to do the work, and the work is the basics, right? We talk about this all the time. Stress management, your nutrition, sleep, strength training, movement, all of that, but it's also the inner work, right? Like how would I describe like the inner work? Well, that can be anything from letting go of the beliefs that you have around food, good, bad, whatever the case may be. Carbs are bad, sugar's bad, all of that, or your diet has to look a certain way. Because I know a lot of us have, I know you're going to laugh, but a lot of us have grown up with like the whole plain broccoli, chicken, rice, and it doesn't have to look like that. But that, I know it does for you. You're like, I eat simple, which is totally cool, right? But this is the beauty of all of this, is that
you're individual.
Yeah, and you can tailor it to your preferences and your life, because it has to fit within the parameters of your life, because if it doesn't, then it's not, then you're going to feel like you're failing, but you're not failing. You just haven't learned the way that, for you. I think that's key.
What is it that you have to realize in order to realize what doesn't work for you?
You have to go through the process and just practice, fuck around and find out, right? It really is. It's all trial and error. This is all trial and error. I'm still learning about myself. I'm going to continue learning about myself. And I think that's I think that's the greatest gifts, like that we are able to continually learn and not be stagnant. And I feel like my experience, and I'm sure with you, like our experiences are helping you as like the people that we help, our clients and whatnot. And through our experiences, they figure out what works for them. And that has been that's something that I've noticed since I started coaching, is how so many of my clients have moved from this kind of fixed mindset to this growth mindset of not only being able to do it and being capable and developing that self-trust and belief, but also like the biggest thing is figuring out a system that works for them that doesn't necessarily look like the typical checklist you see on social media. Because it doesn't have to.
What you don't know what you don't know is the very big thing here. And I think that is one of the greatest gifts. What I really want people to realize here is you need to get out of your comfort zone, and you're never going to push yourself to do the hard things if you think that those sacrifices are going to last forever. But also you need to stop your own bullshit. You need to realize what is it that you actually want, which maybe we can talk on that on the next podcast, because I still think people aren't getting it clear enough as a vision. Because if you can't make the trade-off, or quote unquote the sacrifice, to just get your ass up and go for a 15-minute walk, and I will say quote unquote you don't want it bad enough because it's 15 minutes, but at the same time it's not just as simple as that. What is stopping you? What beliefs do you have in your head? What is fundamentally stopping you from doing the most basic simple things? Because until you get to the root of that, it's very difficult for you to do the things, doing the things in a positive way that's going to stick, because this thing is going to keep coming up, and there is a reason why you're not doing the thing.
Yeah. And, just to kind of go back to what you said about not wanting it bad enough. And I don't know if it's necessarily you don't want it bad enough. Again, I feel like it still comes back to, and again, we can talk about this more, but it comes back to, what are the reasons for the inaction? Like what part of you is coming up? Like, again, self-protection, like why are you holding back? Why aren't we taking that step? Right. And that might require a little bit more of, taking a deeper dive into those reasons. And maybe that is the reason that you aren't able to take that step.
Yeah.
Right. You don't want to look in the mirror. You don't want to face the things that maybe you're afraid of, or maybe, like you talked about in the beginning of the podcast, like what's on that other side. Well, you won't know and unless you take that step, right? So I feel like it's a lot more complex than what maybe social media makes it, or what your algorithm is set at. It is a lot more complex and nuanced. Again, it does go back at the end of the day, to lose fat, you do have to be in a deficit, but what that deficit looks like and how you navigate that deficit is going to differ from person to person, depending on their life, is the key. Right. And I think if we can really hone in on that part of all of this, because anyone can follow a broccoli, chicken, rice diet, but most people aren't going to be able to stick to that. And so if we can just figure out how to incorporate those principles into your life, it'll work. So it's all about how to navigate that deficit for you and your life.
Yeah. and realizing that the deficit isn't the end point,
No.
and you can pull yourself out whenever. And that is the choice. The thing is removing your timeline. And Dell and I are definitely going to have to talk on this again, because I feel like a lot of you will benefit so much from this. And if any of this relates whatsoever, if you made any links, please reach out to us. I feel like you guys are going to start seeing things differently once you slow down and not just shove this podcast off because it's not another give me some practical tips. You've had enough of those. You really have. You need to just think a little differently about the way you do things, the way you think about things, and your reaction to things, and things will change. With that, I hope you loved this, and you will hear us on the next podcast that we do together too. Is there anything else that you want to leave them with?
No, I think you summed it up. It's just, really approaching this differently than you have before.
Yeah, because if you want things to change, you have to change what you do.
Yeah.
Okay. I will hear you. You will hear me on the next podcast. Please click that 5 stars. You don't need to leave a review. Just click the 5 stars. I love you all. And bye.